Welcome to The Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. The White House denies the success of the previous administration keeping peace in the Middle East, while violence surges there as we speak. The military canceled him, but the outspoken Space Force commander is getting more clout for his views on critical race theory, with his book reaching #1 on Amazon. A Michigan judge dismissed the lawsuit for a forensic audit of Antrim County's election, but he doesn't deny that there weren't problems. And finally, Wisconsin announces plans for a statewide audit of the 2020 election. Okay, my friends, let's take a closer look together. There's no firm sign of any imminent ceasefire between Israel and the Islamic terrorist group led by Hamas. More than 3,400 Hamas rockets were fired at Israel, but 1 in 6 fell short of its mark and crashed into Gaza. The misfired rockets ended up hurting the Palestinians. Biden continues to be at odds with fellow Democrats. Progressive members in the party are calling for a tougher stand on Israel. The Biden administration says it's using quiet, intensive diplomacy to end the conflict, but it doesn't recognize the achievements of the Abraham Accords in normalizing relations between Arab nations and Israel. On Tuesday, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said, "We are not following the tactics of the prior administration," referring to the Abraham Accords. She called the peace proposal dead on arrival and claimed the deal didn't do anything constructive to bring an end to the long-standing conflict in the Middle East. Abraham Accords are a diplomatic legacy of the Trump administration, normalizing relations between Israel and 3 Arab states, Sudan, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates. Israel and Morocco also normalized relations, although the agreement was not part of the original accords. The Abraham Accords state, "We believe that the best way to address challenges is through cooperation and dialogue, and that developing friendly relations among states advances the interest of lasting peace in the Middle East and around the world. We seek tolerance and respect for every person in order to make this world a place where all can enjoy a life of dignity and hope, no matter their race, faith, or ethnicity." The Biden administration tends to keep a hostile view of its predecessor, turning everything political. If the current administration wants to foster harmony in the Middle East, it better recognize the values presented in the Abraham Accords. The current conflict between Israel and Hamas cannot erase the achievements of the agreements. The monumental agreements signed last year do have a long-lasting impact on the region. First, the Abraham Accords break the notion that Arab reconciliation with Israel is only achievable after resolving the Palestinian problem. Some people believed for negotiations to succeed, Israel must be weakened, but there's no evidence to support this. Economically, the agreements are also a big success. They created opportunities in tourism, civil aviation, technology and innovation, environment and agriculture, and more in the region. Moreover, Bahrain and UAE pride themselves as nations of tolerance. By signing the accords, they take pride in extending that tolerance to the region's Jews. No one should deny tolerance dissolves conflicts, whether it's among individuals or among states. Unfortunately, Psaki's rhetoric set a different tone from Biden's State Department, which has signaled support for the Abraham Accords. In January, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, "We very much support the Abraham Accords. We think that Israel's normalizing relations with its neighbors and other countries in the region is a very positive development." Iran, the biggest sponsor of Hamas, has a new 25-year deal with the Chinese Communist Party. The two tyrannical regimes didn't forget to help each other out during the current chaos. At a virtual debate at the UN Secretary Council on Palestine, the CCP's foreign minister spokeswoman, Hua Chunying, claimed the U.S. is standing on the opposite side of the international community, she said. The U.S. keeps saying it cares about the human rights of Muslims, but it was ignoring the suffering of the Palestinian people. Well, let us remind everyone that the CCP is committing genocide to Uyghur Muslims in China. The level of hypocrisy in Hua's statement is just insane. CCP's foreign minister Wang Yi also spoke up. Wang called on the U.S. to adjust its position on the Israel-Gaza conflict. He added, "Simply because of the obstruction of one country," pointing to the U.S., the UN Security Council hasn't been able to speak with one voice. Iran's press TV quoted Wang at length. It reported China's foreign minister blasts the United States for choking any criticism of the Israeli regime's barbarity against the Palestinians, at the United Nations Security Council. By quoting the CCP, Iran appears to be emphasizing Beijing is playing a larger role in the Middle East. The Chinese Communist Party, on the other hand, isolates America, undermining regional and international confidence in the United States. In California, little confidence is left for Governor Gavin Newsom. In the expansion of the state's health insurance program, Newsom introduced plans to allow illegal immigrants 60 and older to be eligible for coverage. The price tag to taxpayer is estimated at nearly $860 million. However, progressive members in the Democratic Party want more. They have been lobbying Newsom to make all illegal immigrants eligible for health care coverage. The Golden State is home to at least 3 million illegals. California's health insurance system already covers young immigrants illegally living in the country to the age of 26. Earlier this month, State Assemblyman Democrat Miguel Santiago introduced legislation that would allow adults to add their elderly illegal parents as dependents to their health insurance coverage. Some Democrats are hoping that California will set a precedent for other states to follow. State Senator Maria Elena Durazo said, "Our ultimate goal is everyone." Sarah Dar, a director at the California Immigrant Policy Center, claimed everyone has been talking about how certain communities were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, including the undocumented. She said, "Now is the time to do as much as we can to help other communities." Today, Americans are forced to subsidize about $18.5 billion a year for medical costs of illegals living in the U.S. Finally, a commander in the military spoke up about his concerns that critical race theory and Marxism is being pushed in the Army. Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeyer, a U.S. Space Force commander, promoted his book titled Irresistible Revolution, Marxism's Goal of Conquest and the Unmaking of the American Military on a podcast. Lohmeyer made comments that run contrary not only to the critical race ideology, but to what the Biden administration is trying to have as part of the education system in the U.S. Lohmeyer has an extensive military education and saw firsthand how cultural Marxism is being incorporated into the military. In the podcast interview, he says, Marxism's goal of conquest is Western civilization, the nuclear family, and capitalism. It's an oppressor versus the oppressed, a victimhood mentality. Lohmeyer argues in critical race theory, race is the lens through which the world is viewed. Such ideology weaponizes race dialogue to only cause more division among people. He says the so-called diversity, inclusion, and equity push in the military is actually rooted in Marxism, which is indeed anti-American. For these reasons, Lohmeyer was relieved of his command and is now being investigated. However, the firing gained the former commander and his book more recognition. His book has reached the #1 bestseller on Amazon. A book review from Jack Stewart says, Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeyer analyzes such false claims under the searing light of the truth, showing the actual damage caused to today's military and the potential for far worse damages to both our military and our society, if this movement is not stopped dead in its tracks. Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeyer has taken the extraordinary step of publishing the book while on active duty, fully aware of the risks such publication might raise. But the message is too critical to wait. Lohmeyer gets that, knowing the stakes nonetheless. From the military to the airways, American Airlines is investigating pilot Guy Midkiff from Southlake, Texas. Midkiff is a 30-year veteran pilot from the airlines, but his job is now uncertain after he criticized the Cultural Competence Action Plan pushed in his local school district. The plan is an implementation of critical race theory. It was developed after white students were caught on video singing a rap song with racial slur. The critical race-inspired action plan sparked intense pushback from members of Southlake community. Midkiff used social media and podcasts to blast critical race proponents and the plan. This made the pilot a target of pro-CRT activists who are pressuring American Airlines to fire Midkiff. But Midkiff is undaunted. He accused activists for allegedly using teenage students as a shield so that they can blame anyone who doesn't agree with them for harassing minors. The Texas pilot said, "A tactic of the left is to push kids out in front of the lead of their cause. They do this to insulate themselves from attacks by adults that fear being called a grown man harassing students for challenging their false narrative. Never give in to the bullying tactics of the leftists." The airline's decision is in fact at odds with the will of the Southlake people. On May 1st, voters of South Lake elected 2 critical race theory opponents to the school board in a landslide victory. The South Lake Families PAC tweeted, "Critical race theory ain't coming here. This is what happens when good people stand up and say, no, not in my town, not on my watch." Now, before we continue, if you like our program, please hit that like button and subscribe. It'll force the algorithm to share this video to potentially thousands of people. If you want to support Eye Opener, please consider donating to the show. You can find our donor box link down in the description. Your support is greatly appreciated. Salute. Colonial Pipeline cyberattack didn't change some Democrats' anti-pipeline view. In Michigan, Democrat Governor Gretchen Whitmer ordered Calgary-based oil company Enbridge to shut down its pipeline known as Line 5. Line 5 moves oil and natural gas from Western Canada through Michigan and the Great Lakes to refineries in the Canadian province of Ontario. The pipeline supplies oil to Michigan, Ohio, and as far as Pennsylvania. For Canada, it supplies Ontario and Quebec. Now, for 67 years since the inception of pipeline, Line 5 hasn't had a leak, but Whitmer views it as a grave threat to Michigan's environment and economy and called it a ticking time bomb. She pointed to an anchor dragging across the pipeline in 2018 as a close call and claimed it damaged the integrity of Line 5. Whitmer originally ordered Enbridge to shut down by May 12th, but the Canadian oil company said it won't shut down its operations unless ordered to do so by a court. International law also supports the Canadians. Michigan has no right to order the shutdown. The 1977 Transit Pipeline Treaty points to the United States, not Michigan, as legally bound to keep the pipeline running. In light of the gas crisis in the southeast caused by the Colonial cyberattack, a Michigan newspaper slammed Whitmer's decision to shut down the Canadian pipeline. The Detroit News said, "Had Enbridge obeyed the governor's edict and ceased transporting products through Line 5, Michigan and other Midwestern states would have experienced a similar plight." The newspaper points out Whitmer's proposal to carry fuel by rail and road instead was ridiculously inadequate. Yesterday, Michigan's 13th Circuit Court Judge Kevin Elsenheimer dismissed William Bailey's lawsuit. Bailey was seeking an independent audit of Antrim County's election. Back in November, Bailey asked for a forensic examination of the machines and was granted relief. The team conducting the audit found several flaws in the voting software, but Dominion, Michigan State, and Antrim County officials disputed the report by questioning the examiner's credibility. The county was later caught for having 1,000 phantom ballots. These voters were missing on Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson's voter rolls. With the new discovery, Bailey filed another motion. After 1 week of consideration, Judge Elsenheimer ruled in favor of a joint motion filed by Secretary of State. The judge said Bailey had already received the relief he sought last year and told the court that the plaintiff's claims are moot. Bailey's lawyer, Matthew DePerno, says he plans on appealing the decision and filing a motion for reconsideration. DePerno intends to file other lawsuits as well for different voter irregularity issues found in Antrim County. DePerno said the judge was wrong on his interpretation of the Michigan Constitution and wrong on the idea that the Secretary of State has her ability to invent her own procedures to audit an election. Aware of the highly controversial election results in Antrim County, Judge Elsenheimer did stress that his ruling was about testing the legal sufficiency of the claims brought by Bailey. Following Election Day, the county corrected the results twice. Its margin of error from the initial count is a startling 45%. Elsenheimer said the dismissal doesn't mean election machines weren't corrupt or corruptible. It also didn't mean there were no problems in the way the county conducted the election. Now, on the other hand, Michigan's neighbor Wisconsin got some good news. Newsmax White House correspondent Emerald Robinson on Sunday announced the state of Wisconsin will audit the results of the 2020 election. Biden only won Wisconsin by about 20,000 votes. Republicans in the state legislature ordered the audit almost 3 months ago, arguing the measure is necessary to increase transparency of the highly controversial presidential election in the state. In November, the Trump campaign financed partial recounts of the largest and most liberal counties of Milwaukee and Dane in Wisconsin. However, the recount failed to discard ballots that were found invalid, thus rendering the efforts ineffective. In 2020, mail-in ballots saw a 470% increase from 170,000 in 2016 to 960,000 in 2020, making up almost 75% of the total ballot cast in the state. However, the absentee ballot rejection rate in 2020 was unusually low at 0.2%, down 1.2% from the 2016 election. Concerns over mail-in voting and lack of voter ID laws are still prevalent among Wisconsin voters. The new statewide audit will review the performance and methodology of each jurisdiction's voting system and error rate, including absentee and electronic voting. Republican State Senator and co-chair of the audit committee, Robert Cole, said, "The new audit will help people understand our elections better and hopefully put to rest concerns. And if there are some problems with administration, I'm confident we'll fix them." And that's it for today, my friends. Check out the playlist right here for more eye-opening content. You can join me on the Eye Opener Telegram chat room and follow me on YouMaker, Gab, and Parler. Now, don't forget, please sign up to the email list so that we can stay in contact with each other. I want to thank you all, and I'll see you next time.